Hello, everyone, and welcome to AI Trends for Strategy and Consulting. This time, we're going to do something a little different around understanding the executive perspective. Normally, we focus just on how strategists and consultants can use AI, but today we're going to think about how our clients thinking about AI and what trends do we need to think about when we're serving them. So, to kick things off, let me just introduce myself for those that are joining for the first time. I haven't done a webinar with me before. My name is Jeffrey Davis. I'm a business strategist who's done work for McKinsey. I've done digital transformation at IBM, and I've done business transformation for Majid Al Futtaim, a large organization in the Middle East. And I've done some very serious large-scale adoptions all around, from doing GenA rollouts for a $1 billion organization. I'm the founder of Ascend AI, which essentially is specializing in AI for consultants and strategy. And I built my own database of over 300 prompts, agents, et cetera, that kind of put things all together. And I am a specialist at kind of building those strategy decks and proposals over the last 10 years. So let us dive right in and really start to look at what the big thing is that we're talking about today. So the landscape that we're really talking about is around AI literacy, right? And we think about the clients that we're working with. These are going to be the C-suites, the partners, the executives, right? And when we're thinking about this, are the people that we're working with, how familiar are they with AI? Are they using AI for their highest value task, or are they just kind of using Copilot or ChatGPT to send an email? Do they know what tools, models, et cetera, are out there currently, or are they missing that piece? If you ask them to build a workflow or do something on a day-to-day basis, where would they actually stand? And do they really understand how much and how relevant the potential of AI is, but also its limitations? So over the last kind of 3 weeks, I've been having a bunch of different cohorts with CEOs, and I think a lot of answers to these questions is they don't exactly know any of this stuff in terms of how to practically use it. When it comes to theory and understanding the overarching ideas of AI is going to be good for me, it's going to drive productivity, it will increase my profit margin. But the big question is, when is that going to happen and how is it going to happen? I think around all business leaders, it's exceptionally clear, right? 69%. Everyone is kind of clear that AI is going to be important, and understanding AI is going to be essential for work at an executive level and even at a manager and a junior level, right? Everyone is going to need to know this. And one of the biggest reasons that we all need to know this, and this comes from an MIT study that's kind of been spreading out all over, is that 95% of AI pilots are failing right now. Now, part of this is from executives' lack of kind of fundamental understanding of how AI actually works, which means I am being sold to $12 million, $5 million AI transformation projects, implementation projects, tools, platforms, all these things. But there's too many things to understand, and I don't have the basics of understanding what I need to do. Could I build that prompt? Could I understand a workflow? Do I have the basics to be able to make those big money decisions and get it right? Right? Because we all want to make sure that we're in the 5% of successful and not the 95% of projects that are failing. Now, one of the reasons in the core of what's kind of happening here is the way that executives, our clients, are kind of learning around AI right now. And I think this is one of the big things that we want to figure out how we can fundamentally change the way either your boss, your partner, your executive is thinking about this right now. Right now today, everyone is kind of looking across LinkedIn, news articles, and you're getting like the big headlines. Today, Gemini 3.0 came out. Cool, it's announced this whole thing. It's got a new code editor. It's the tool's a little bit different, but that's the headline. But the reality is there's a headline every other week, and every end of quarter, there's another blast that's going out. So how do we not be so overwhelmed by everything that's going on? Then when it comes to cool, you've announced this new tool. Maybe I'm going to try to use one of these use cases, or I'm going to try it. There isn't really a lot of education or information to let me know how to actually practically get the best out of these tools. So now I'm confused on what I should be using, how I'm going to use it, when I should be using it. And the result of that is that we really start to waste hours either prompting or trying to get the results that we want and that we expect from like our senior people, but we're not getting that result. And that's exceptionally frustrating, because the reality, whether you're an executive, a junior, you're mid-right, you are probably exceptionally smart. You know what you are doing. But if you're not able to figure out this tool, that just feels like, you know what, the tool's not for me. The technology isn't there. and I can't actually use it to do the things that matter to me on a day-to-day basis. So we start to blame the tool instead of taking that kind of should we have learned a little bit more in terms of the basics for us to be able to deliver that. So I think if we take this back a little bit, I think when ChatGPT kind of first came out, it was the back and forth that allowed for us to actually get some really interesting and cool results. It was really exciting. You were able to get results instantly from ChatGPT. Typed in, you got something back. And it looked like it was good, it like it was solid, like it was really hefty, and you got a lot of immediate gains just from visuals, right? So you felt like I'm moving much faster, I'm doing things much easier just from that start. And I think when we think about what problem these kind of tools are solving for us, right? When we think about ChatGPT, when that was first launched, right? The basis of what that was, it was saving me time in comparison to me having to do research on Google and reading articles to get answers. So can I find benchmarks for my client, type it in ChatGPT, get a great response, or something that felt good enough, even if it wasn't correct, for me to be like, cool, I'm happy with that, and then I can go move forward. Then Microsoft Copilot came out in 23. And I think one of the big things that happened was ChatGPT, everyone's using it, but now I need to be able to use it inside of my corporate environment or inside of my consultancy or my agency where we have some security concerns or our clients have security concerns. So now everyone's moved from ChatGPT, which is kind of leading the way at some point, and now we're all in Microsoft Copilot and we're not really getting the same results that we wanted to. Right. So it feels like it's a kind of dumbed down version that's not delivering the same results. So now inside of work, I'm not able to use it that much, but I have to use all these external tools to be able to get the results I'm looking for. Now, this is then where kind of the culmination of that kind of then doubles down, where people are like, look, ChatGPT was good, but we can't use it. Microsoft Copilot is good, but it's not delivering us the great results. I want to figure out how I can get my company's IP, data, information, context, client work, all that kind of stuff put together. And then people started to build their own in-house GPTs, right? Where now I can protect my own IP from competitors. I can have all my correct information in there. And this is kind of leads us to where we are today, right? But that trial and error that has kind of led us to where we are today no longer really works. The big issue and problem that we're having with that now is not everyone is able to use these tools for high value work. So on the right hand side, I've got an example, right, of me using ChatGPT to be able to create a presentation, right? I can say, do some research for me, here's some information. But then when I say, turn that research and information into an executive presentation, the result it gives me is this thing at the bottom where it's like market overview, global streaming market, key players, market growth trends. But that's not the expectation that I had. And it's nowhere near what it's even close to what it was delivering to me before. So then the question becomes, how do I actually get ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, any of the other tools to actually deliver me the outputs that I need to be able to do high value work? Unreliable results. I'm going back and forth. There's a new tool every day promising something else. And there's not enough time in the day for me to learn about all these things that are out there. So I just want to put a question out there to everyone, right? Because I think this is where things start to get interesting in terms of what's the use cases that are actually delivering value and how can I be using AI for. Could anyone here, build a board ready strategy deck in 30 minutes? And feel free to message in the chat. We'll get to it a bit later. But when I'm talking to either executives, partners, people that have to do this on a day-to-day basis, the answer is no. They don't know exactly which tools to use. They cannot be able to build the prompts, and they wouldn't even know what order they would have to be asking ChatGPT to deliver the output. What a lot of people are doing right now, which is completely fair because that's the kind of basics that we've all kind of been using, is you say, hey, can you please deliver me this output? You get a subpar output, and that's kind of it. But if you actually want to be able to build a board ready strategy deck in 30 minutes or less with AI, you need to be thinking not about a single output, but you need to be thinking about how you can deliver a workflow for this. Now, that workflow for this, if you think about it, has to deal with going through a couple different tools to get a result or an output that you need. So when we think about a brief, research, insights, developing a narrative, and finally getting to the slides, there are some tools that are better than others in terms of getting there. And you need to think about, for my workflow, what's my kind of 4 or 5 step process? What's the most high value thing that I could be working on? And then with the tools that I either have available to me or that are currently outside of my ecosystem, how can I combine them to get the correct result? So this is actually the workflow that I would go through to deliver a brief in 30 minutes. I would use Copilot to generate the brief, which I'll walk you through in more detail. I would use Claude or Perplexity to do the research. I would use Notebook LM to be able to pull insights. I would use ChatGPT to help me build a narrative. And then I would use a tool called Manus, which I'll walk you through in a little bit, to be able to actually get that first draft. And for each of these, I might have had to build a prompt that I know I can use every single time I need to deliver a workflow that was then going to deliver that final result, right? So this workflow allows us to move through these systems quickly without having to repeat ourselves. So when we think about Copilot, which is what most of us probably have, some of us might be in Google's ecosystem with Gemini, but most of us are going to be a Copilot, and most of us are having calls. And if we think about this as the basic premise of having a client call, I'm talking with the executives to get a brief, we can essentially scrape any transcript that's there, right? And we can be able to get a brief that's well structured. We only need one prompt that will allow us to be able to put that together. And I can use that prompt for every single call I have, right? So briefing prompt gives me a document that I'm able to use, and I can send that to any client that's around, right? Secondly, we're thinking about how do I then take that brief and then use that for context to then feed into the AI. So one of the big things that everyone is talking about when it comes to AI right now has to do with context. What probably happens to a lot of you, and it happens to me all the time, is I might be using ChatGPT, might be using Claude, and one of the big things is I'll be talking to it and either it runs out of memory, or after I've been chatting to it, maybe 10 questions down, it forgets the first thing I told it. Now, this is why we have that brief, because that becomes almost like the hold of context. So you can always say, please reference brief that I've submitted, and then it should always be able to pull that information back and forth. And then you can also carry that context from one tool to the next tool if you need to move to another one. So when it comes to something like Claude, I'll take that brief, I'll put it in there, and I'll say, hey, please do some research on these topics based on this client brief. So now it's got my context, and it's got a well-defined prompt that's going to give me all of the research and information that I need, right? So now you've generated your brief, you've generated your research, and now one of the biggest things that you need when you're thinking about, okay, how do I get to the next step of delivering that strategy deck, is I need to figure out what are going to be the top insights that I'm going to need and what's going to be the best way for me to format them. Normally, when I grab any of my insights, I'm using Notebook LM. So if I've got lots of interviews, I have transcripts, all that kind of stuff, large documents, financial stuff, I can upload all that information into Notebook LM. It's going to be able to scan a large swath of data, right? And it could transform it into any number of things that I need. For right now, I might just need it to deliver me a research report with the insights that I'm looking for the themes, the problems, the metrics, any solutions potentially that have been identified. Those are things that I can define in a prompt and then ask it to pull that information out. If I needed it in other things in terms of I need to deep dive into information, Notebook LM also has an entire mind mapping tool that allows you to deep dive into data in a really interesting way. But now I've got my insights. So I'm ready to essentially craft my narrative, right? If you guys follow any of these big strategists, they always say, you know, what's the insight that's going to drive change, or that's going to be the switching trigger for a client to go from saying, I don't believe in this, to I do believe in this, and yes, I would support it, and yes, I will invest in it. And I think using ChatGPT to help you craft that narrative by taking your brief, the insights that you've generated, and now saying, hey, please craft me a proposal narrative or a strategy narrative based on whether it's sustainability or whether it's digital transformation, you'll be able to then craft that kind of brief that's going to give you the correct context you're looking for. But you have to always remember that whenever using any of these tools, you are the expert. ChatGPT is not the expert, Claude is not the expert, Perplexity is not the expert. You have to continue to feed it with your expertise, your context, and your knowledge in order for you to get the results that you're looking for. And you should be using ChatGPT or any of these other tools just to deliver you the correct flow and frameworks for outputs you need in order for you to make the right decisions and move things down the line. Now, the last bit of that kind of proposal process that is Manus. This is one of my favorite tools out there. If you haven't used it, I highly recommend it. And it's probably one of the best ones for actually delivering high quality presentations. The reason that this one differs from a lot of other one is it actually creates a full-fledged presentation look and feel that you can download into PowerPoint and then immediately start to edit. But the interesting thing about it is it manages all the tasks as if there was a task manager, like a project management tool. So you say, I need you to do X. It'll break that task down into 4 or 5 different elements. And then you might have to wait a little longer. So let's say instead of it being a 30-second output, you wait and you get a 10-minute output, but it's gone through the steps of thinking based on the prompt or the thought process you asked it to go through, and then it will deliver you a higher quality into your presentation. So that's how I would go from essentially brief to strategy deck in 30 minutes. Now, when we think about this, 52% of people, right? Let's say half of the people that are on this webinar right now, right? Who are using AI are using it for their most important task. But the other half that are on this call are not. So I think there's a question we all have to really be asking ourselves, whether we're an executive, whether we're the consultant talking to them. Are you using AI for your most important task, or are you using it just for sending an email or drafting a quick document? Because in order for you to get those productivity gains that everyone is talking about, you need to be using it for just average stuff to using it to stuff that delivers you the highest value possible. So let me walk you through a couple examples and a couple people that are using AI for the highest value work that they need. So a good friend of mine, Brenton Price, he's been one of the people that's the farthest ahead in using AI and figuring out how to implement it across when it comes to strategy work. And he essentially has set up 4 different agents that help him across doing strategy work that he needs to deliver on. So whenever he needs to essentially do any strategy deck or any strategy work, he's thinking about, I need an agent similar to a team. So he's one guy that essentially is operating as if he's got a team of 5, where he's got a go-to-market specialist agent that focuses exclusively on market entry and positioning strategies, right? So that one doesn't get confused with 1,000 different questions on things that don't really matter or are not super relevant. He's only asking that one go-to-market strategies. So if you downloaded that brief, he's sending that in and he's getting that information back. He's got another one that he set up for industry expertise. So I've seen other people do separate AI agents for different industries. So one that's specifically for health, one that might be for sustainability, one that might be for digital. And you use that to then make sure you're always up to the cutting edge for any industry trends, legal stuff within that space that you can be talking about. Yeah. Then he's got one that helps him as a product strategist. So when we're thinking about, there are 2 ways for us to really be using AI. You can either be using it today as a kind of one shot. So I've put in a question, it's giving me a direct output. Or you can use it when you're actually more in the flow of something, which is, I don't want the answer right now, but I want to actually work through side to side of an idea that I have so that I can get the best result, right? So how do we start to build these 2 different types of workflows for when I just need something and when I need to actually work through something? The last one he's got is a prototype builder, because he's massive into using Claude and Claude Code. There are other tools called Cursor, and Gemini or Google just came out with their new one. But there's a lot of these that allow people to help you, even if you're not a coder, to build a prototype that's going to be good enough for you to show a client, to be able to understand a concept, so you can really have things working, clicking, moving in a really beautiful way. Now, his tool stack is Claude, Notebook LM, and then a tool called Apify. He uses Apify to essentially scrape the web, pull in information, and then that's the information that ends up going into his industry experts, or when he needs to do a go-to-market analysis. So all that information that he's pulling is scraping from all these kind of public databases for him to be able to get the most relevant information every single time. So his strategies aren't outdated ever. We got another really great guy, Kiz Adon, who's the founder of Moonshot, a really amazing design agency here based in Dubai. And he was one of the people that was using ChatGPT before, right? So when it first came out, he was on ChatGPT, but for the work that he needs to be doing when he's trying to do strategic thinking, he needs to make sure that he's saving time and he's getting reliable results. And ChatGPT was not delivering that for him. So he ended up moving over to Perplexity. And one of the big differences between ChatGPT or Perplexity is the sources. So when you're using a Perplexity tool, it'll give you all the sources that will actually be live links that you can use. Sometimes if you're using ChatGPT to say, hey, give me some results or make sure this is sourced, or you're even doing deep research, some of the links might be dead, maybe they don't work. And that doesn't instill confidence when you need to present this to a client. I think we've all on here probably either seen or heard of the Deloitte use case where they submitted an entire piece of work, but the sources weren't verified and they had fake links because someone had used ChatGPT, right? And then they had to issue a refund. We don't want that when we're delivering work. So using tools like Perplexity, when you need to actually confirmed, validated research, is going to get you a step ahead instead of trying to use ChatGPT, which is not always going to give you the correct links and sources. Because the reality is that AI doesn't have it in it to tell you that it's lied or it doesn't know the truth that it's telling you. It's giving you the highest probability answer, right? So always make sure you understand that it's the AI's best guess, right, at a right answer. So when you think about how he's using that, he's using it for data collection, understanding patterns in the data that he's got, for helping him determine hypotheses and solutions that he could be presenting to clients. And he's using it for evidence mapping as well. When you need to deliver on a proposal or when you're trying to essentially ship things out, you want to make sure that you've got the backing, the right case studies to be able to say, yes, this is going to be right. And I think AI is an absolutely amazing use case for that. He's also using it for the story architecture, like I mentioned earlier, to be able to help bring those things together. Now, his tool stack from left to right here is Perplexity, ChatGPT, Gemini, Notion AI, one of my favorites, Firefly from Adobe, and Figma. And he's using Figma slides as well. Now, our last person, Riyadh, a partner at Arthur D. Little, he's using this on the front end of his proposal work to really understand how we can be shortening his time for biz dev. And I think for him, it was an easy no-brainer from going from 20 days of biz dev to bringing that right down to 10, right? It's an easy calculation to make when you're using AI correctly, right? And for him, he's using that for pre-sales to be able to do pre-lead generation research, to be able to identify prospects, to be able to think about how is he doing competitor analysis, benchmarking, industry assessment, market analysis. All these things are really easy for AI to be able to produce for you as long as you've got the right prompts and the right information to make sure you're validating that information correctly, right? Then he's then using those kind of specialized agents to figure out how we can understand things on energy, telecom, all the different markets that are important to him. And then he's using some presentation AI tools, which I'll walk you through in 1 second. The one he's using is called Auxi. For those that don't know, AUXI.ai. So his tool stack is ChatGPT, Notebook LM, Ask Brian, which is a specific AI chatbot tool that's brought out by ThinkCell, and then Auxi, the tool that I mentioned earlier, which helps you adjust and edit presentations. For those that haven't seen in our previous webinar on the top 10 tools, Auxi is one of those that gets mentioned. Now, here's the kind of big ticket item that everyone's looking for, and everyone's wondering why it's not being delivered to me, right? The big thing that everyone is saying is AI can save you 240 hours or 30 working days per professional per year if implemented right. Now, if you're on the senior level, that can equate to essentially $20,000 per employee. If you're thinking about time for yourself, that's $120,000 per year per executive. Now, if we think about that, what does that actually translate into? That's around an hour per day, right? That you're actually saving. So when you think about it, what am I going to do with those 30 extra days? And how can I actually get to those 30 extra days? Because not everyone is getting that hour a day or those 30 extra days that get culminated throughout the year. And what's the difference that we can do for us to actually get there? And I think the big problem that we all have when we're trying to figure out AI and we're trying to move these things forward really comes down to the fact that reading these headlines and trying to trial and error was not meant for people that are time poor and delivering high value work. right? There's no way for us to get those 30 days back trying to do trial and error because you're burning them anyways. So you need to almost have framework set up. You need to be building out your own prompts, your own databases in order for you to really start to get those gains. Now, it's not exceptionally hard, but it is something we have to look out for. And I think if you guys haven't heard the story of Stephen Schwartz, I think it's a very great kind of cautionary tale of a guy when ChatGPT kind of first came out, New York-based lawyer, and he used ChatGPT to write a legal brief, right? And AI essentially invented 6 completely fake case citations. I heard from someone the other day, same thing happened to them, cost them 35,000 dirhams. Because this guy had never used ChatGPT before, he essentially got barred, from actually practicing because he didn't understand the tool he was using. He implicitly trusted what he received. And he delegated work to AI without actually knowing its limitation. This is really what happens when we don't understand what's actually happening, what's being brought to us. So we need to do a lot better in terms of thinking about how can we actually succeed, right? And in a world where leaders, executives, strategists need to learn to use AI before we can actually even invest or implement it, there's a few things that we really want to consider that I want you all to kind of go home with, right? We need to take time to actually understand the tool stack that's being used, right? When can we use which tools when? If you learn that, you're already 50% above everybody else. If you go even deeper where you think, what tools only matter to me in terms of my personal workflow? You're not even thinking about your entire organization, not even thinking about your team. Just if you solve your personal problem, I'm sure you'll be able to solve the person next to you's problem. Then I want everyone to really think about focusing on the fundamentals of prompting, right? How do you get the basics of creating a single prompt that gives you one output? How do you create a sequence of prompts that essentially says, I need something to generate a brief, then I need something to take in that brief and then do some research based off of it. How do you start to sequence those things in the right way? And I think the last bit is if you know the fundamentals and you understand what tools are kind of available to you, it's very easy for you then to learn to connect those dots and to think about, for my team or for others, we can now be doing this because I now understand this a lot better. So I would say think about serving yourself first, your team second, your department or your organization third, because it'll always help you get those things along. So just to kind of turn the corner on this so you guys understand in terms of what is a breakdown in terms of a step-by-step process to get you to where you want to go. We've put together a way for you to kind of go from being a basic user to an informed builder in 24 hours, right? And when we think about this, there's the for you and there's for scale. So I really want everyone to kind of think about this as a 2-step approach. One is focus on yourself first. How can I update my prompt fundamentals? How can I figure out how to build some basic workflows? You don't even have to build them. You just have to understand how they connect. Then after you understand those 2 things, you're ready to think about what can I do for my team for us to actually have some AI native experiences, right? How do we feel like we're not foreign, but we can use these tools on day-to-day in terms of how everything we do? And this last bit is then how do you measure your ROI on that? What you don't want, and one of the biggest problems that people are having now with those 95% is 95% of those pilots are getting 0 return on investment, 0 productivity gains, 0 revenue or profit growth or profit margin. And that's because they're not 100% sure how they should be implementing and what they should be using on a day-to-day basis. So one of the things that we really want you to double down on is think about those prompt fundamentals. If you can essentially either understand how you can create a prompt and think about what's the framework that I want the AI to follow, what's the process I want the AI to follow, what's the output I need from the AI, and then think about how can you test that output across different tools. Maybe you want to see how my prompt works in ChatGPT versus how it works in Claude versus how it works in Copilot or how it works in Manus. So you can see, is my prompt working across these different tools and is it staying up to date as time goes on? Then you'll have to consider certain tools don't allow you to, example, have long prompts. So in Copilot, there's a prompt limit. So you can only have 4,000 characters. So how can you readjust either long or short prompts to make sure they fit within there, but they give you all the context that you need, right? So then it's about connecting those workflows from saying, I'm using either these 4 tools, these 2 tools, these 4 prompts, and I'm going to put them together to be able to deliver the outcome I'm looking for. Whether that's you trying to have a little AI chief of staff, whether you need to deliver some strategy decks, whether you need to deliver proposals, figure out that workflow, and then get those things working together. Then you can graduate and start to take things one step further, where after you've created these prompts, you understand the workflows, you can start to build these AI native services or experiences where you no longer need a chatbot. And I think that's where things will go next when we're thinking about the future. Not everyone is going to continue to want to type into what we call like terminal or the command line. I don't want to chat all day. I just want to press a button and I want to get a result. So how does every button have a prompt that you guys can move forward with? And the last thing, we really want to think about, how do we measure our return on investment? How do we make sure before we start any of these pilots, before we implement any of these tools, we know exactly what the company's goals are? Not in terms of, or even your personal goals, but not in terms of, oh, I just want things to be a little faster, but what's the actual high value goals that the company is going for? What's going to get you promoted? What's going to get the company to double NOPAT? What are the big goals that you guys have? And then think about the use cases that you can use for that specifically. Then I cannot stress this enough. Once you figure that out, you identified your blockers, you come up with your solution, reduce the scope. It's always nice to have a really big, shiny project, the full shebang. Think about scaling it back in terms of what can you deliver in 90 days? What could you deliver that's smaller in 60 days? What could you deliver in 30 days? Because the idea is if you have a solution to your problem, it shouldn't matter how big it is. It could be a doorstop, or it could be an automatic opening door, right? Both of those keep a door open. So I think about that and figure out where you are in that space. Then, just so you guys know, this is something that we're actually offering as a service for executives and teams to be able to upskill themselves. So this is where I'll kind of end. But if you want to understand what's actually out there and put things together for yourself or for your team, you want to figure out how you can upskill yourselves to get things in the right place. And then you need to pilot those tools so you can actually start to get your hands dirty and figure out what's working, what's not working, and being able to measure ROI. This is something that we offer, so feel free to reach out after this. Let's go ahead and move on to questions and answers. Thank you guys very much for the time.
Thank you, Jeff. I've got 2 confirmed questions for you right here. One from Arthur, which is, if I can't use any of the platforms that you mentioned for specific workloads, and I don't have processes and IP for that type of work, how can I get the benefit of AI in areas that I don't have expertise?
Perfect. So I think for the areas that you don't have expertise in, the biggest thing you can do is, I'm sure, let's say if you've got a full team, there will be people in your team that have expertise in that space. And also there are professionals out there across the entire world who actually have that expertise. So if you think about the way that I build my prompts today, or the way that I try to grab information, is I will ask, who's the most famous person in this topic? And obviously that person probably exists and they have all this information written down somewhere. So look for someone famous, look for someone who has stuff that's well documented, and then you can upskill yourself, or you can ask ChatGPT to summarize that information. So then you're able to use it and to build better prompts or better workflows for that. But look out for expertise that essentially is online and freely available, and also think about within your team.
Great. And then another question that you get almost every webinar, which is, if you had to pick one platform or software that connects the best tools together that you mentioned, which would it be, as they say they struggle to adopt more than 3 tools at a time?
I'm going to assume that whoever this might be, they're probably on Microsoft Copilot. So what I would probably say is, or I'm going to assume that's within your ecosystem, but even if it wasn't, like Gemini, I would pick whichever one is already company approved as the one to focus on. Because even though Microsoft Copilot isn't going to give you the best results or the best answers, you could still get pretty extreme productivity gains as long as you've created the right prompt and you found the right use case. I can give you an example where we have an entire research team that I was working with, and they needed to figure out how they could essentially read through and analyze transcripts and survey data, right? So I built them essentially a Copilot agent that they could upload that data securely inside of the Microsoft Copilot environment on Teams, and then it gave them all the information. So now that process that used to take them an entire 2 days takes them 30 minutes, right? So even think about that as the kind of main things. If you're outside Microsoft ecosystem and you need to pick one tool that'll get you through almost everything, I would choose Claude as the tool to beat.
Those are all the questions.
Perfect. I want to thank you guys so much for joining. We really appreciate it, and look forward to you guys on the next one.